Good afternoon, and welcome to this first session of our VAT education right here at the Department of Inland Revenue. My name is Beaumont Todd. I am the Training and Communications Manager here at the Department of Inland Revenue. So we want to welcome our persons that are in room as well as those that are actually streaming via YouTube. So we are going to start off this morning just giving an introduction on VAT, a little bit about its history, and we'll talk a little bit about how the sessions are actually going to be over the course of the month. But before we get started, I just want to start with a quick word of prayer to start us off, because that's the only way I know how to start and to end things. Father, we thank you for your grace and mercy. We pray, oh God, for this information that as it is being shared, that persons would be educated, elevated, and illuminated in their understanding of VAT and all aspects of it. We pray, oh God, that you guide us, that everything is done in decency and order, oh God. Help the information to be shared clearly, directly, and by your grace. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, so let's just talk a little bit about how the sessions are actually going to be structured. So for those that are actually tuning in as well as those inside the room, the course and the training is going to be structured in the course of about 7 to 8 modules. Each module is going to touch on a different basis pertaining to VAT, including an introduction and history of VAT, a VAT registration process, understanding VAT invoices, VAT filing process, as well as the VAT payment process. You may want to bring it up on YouTube so they can actually see what we're talking about, as well as the record-keeping compliance aspect of it, some special scenarios like zero exempt aspects, and then also talking a little bit about the VAT withholding aspect of it. So each module is designed to be over the course of about a day to sometimes maybe 2 days. So we will have sessions basically for the public in the afternoons from about 1 until about 3:30. Most training sessions may only be an hour to an hour and a half. Some may go up to about 2.5 hours, depending on how in depth we have to be about the topic that we're actually dealing with. Today is really meant to just be an introduction to go over a little bit of the history and talk a little bit about what it is that we're doing pertaining to VAT. The course is designed for persons, even if you're not in place physically, but you're looking on YouTube, that we will share with you the material as well. We'll have every module will be in a PDF form that we will send you. So we're asking persons to make sure to submit their emails through the registry form. If you haven't gotten it, we will send it out to you. So you could also indicate for the sessions whether you're going to be in person and virtual. We can only take in the room about 25 to maybe 30 persons the most. So this is basically a first come, first serve basis for in-room sessions, but of course YouTube is open to persons as much as they want and as much as they like. At the end of the training, at the end of the month, we'll be probably giving certificates to persons basically who have completed all of the courses. So every module will have a quiz at the end of the module, and we will be providing the material as well as the quiz. You have to get at least a 70% on the quiz and all of the quizzes to make sure at the end of the day that you're able to get the certificates. Please don't take it to be stressing yourself. We'll make sure that you have the information. But it's also so persons don't just turn up and say at the end of the day, we did the course, do no type of testing, and one day certificate. That's unfair to the persons that actually make the effort to go through the material. This is, of course, one of the efforts that the department is making along with the other things that we've been doing through the year. Along with our VAT symposium that we had last month, business license, pop-ups and other things, and we are celebrating 10 years of VAT. So this is all a part of our efforts to educate the public and make sure that everything that we do is transparent, but also it's easy for persons to understand. We know and understand that sometimes persons are intimidated by technology and other things, so we're trying to demystify every aspect of what we do, but also make it easier for the public to be compliant in the work that they do and understand their responsibilities, but also their rights when it comes to VAT, business license, real property, and every aspect of the work that we do at the end of the day. This is a partnership. That's the easiest way I can say it. It's a partnership where we are working with you to give you the information you need, and we're asking you at the same time to work with us so we can better understand what you need to make it easier for you. So our training objectives today, we're going to look at defining value-added tax, differentiate between VAT and sales tax, summarize a little bit about the history and evolution of VAT, understand the purpose and uses of VAT. We're also going to evaluate the progress of VAT and the implementation inside the Bahamas, identify the benefits of VAT registration for businesses, talk a little bit about VAT-related business operations, and apply VAT concepts to some real life scenarios. And again, like I said, time-wise, because we're trying to be cognizant of person's time, we're only trying to keep the sessions no more than an hour and a half, 2 hours and a half the most. So we should be finishing at 3:30 the latest. We'll take about a 10-minute break after about the first 4 or 5 modules, just for persons to stretch their legs, and then we'll come in and finish off the sessions. If you have questions, whether you're in room or actually if you are at the same time online, we ask you to drop it in. If we're not able to finish the questions live at the time, we will follow up with your questions and make sure we send any replies that you may have. Please, let's make this as interactive as possible. If I am going too quickly, persons, please feel free to let me know. It's not about rushing through the information, it's trying to go through the information so it's clear as crystal and not clear as mud at the end of the day. So I ask persons as we work along with each other to let's be patient with each other as we try to go through this process and information. So what is value-added tax? I throw this up, but this is still going to be followed by another question. VAT was introduced in the Bahamas in January 2015. VAT is a consumption tax paid by the final consumer, but collected by VAT registrants and remitted to the Department of Inland Revenue. You can see if persons remember that in a quick second. So, what is value-added tax? It's a consumption tax paid by the consumer. So, our definition. VAT, or VAT stands for value-added tax. It's a type of consumption tax placed on product or service at each stage of production or distribution where value is added. It is paid by the end consumer, but collected and remitted by businesses throughout the supply chain. So, how VAT works. So take, for example, I'm someone that's a farmer. I have to purchase and I sell corn. I grow and I sell corn. In order for me to get my corn, I have to purchase maybe my corn seeds from some other supplier and something. So let's say they are a manufacturer. They sell to me the seed. And the seed, when they sell it to me, they add VAT onto that. I then, in turn, once my corn is fully grown, I take it to market. I would take my corn then, and I would take it and I would actually sell it to somebody. And as long as I am a registered VAT business, let me say this again, a registered VAT business. And I am making sure I emphasize registered VAT business because, first of all, and you may hear me say this again and again throughout the training and throughout the day, if someone is charging VAT and they don't, first of all, have their business license where you can actually see it and it's valid, and then they don't have their VAT certificate up where you can actually see, that is actually illegal. And you don't have to pay VAT to them. I can let that sink in for a quick sec. Because the one thing we don't need is businesses charging persons VAT, and first of all, they are not legally entitled to do so because they're not registered with us. And at the same time, they don't have their VAT certificate where you should be seen. You should not even have to ask. It should be displayed. But if it's not displayed and you want to be polite, you can ask them. And if at the end of the day, they can't produce it, you inform us. And one of our polite persons from compliance, because they're very polite, we'll have a nice visit with them to find out what's going on. But as a consumer, your right is to protect yourself to make sure that anyone that is charging VAT is registered with the Department of Inland Revenue, because we don't need nobody stealing the VAT tax. And then we get that question that I will not address today. We all know what that question is. Is ask me where the VAT money going. So, VAT on sales. Then, at the end of the day, the wholesaler will sell it to the retailer, and the retailer would sell it to the customer. Each business charges VAT on sales, which is their output VAT, and when they pay or they purchase something, that is considered their input VAT. So how we actually calculate VAT, and like I said, we're just glossing over some aspects of this. I don't want nobody hurting their hair with the math aspect of it yet. Is basically you would subtract your input from your output, and that would let you know whether or not that you have VAT to pay to us or you are actually lined up for a refund. Because at the end of the day, whatever your sales are on your VAT, and then whatever your inputs are for your purchases would be your input VAT. And only the value added at each step is taxed. Of course, the final burden of VAT is on the consumer and unfortunately not on the business. So here's how it actually would look. So the manufacturer sells to the wholesaler He takes $100, he adds his 10% VAT onto it. So when he sells it, it's going to be 110. That wholesaler sells it to the retailer. He puts up his price to 200 because he have to cover his cost for what he purchased. He adds his VAT on it, so that's 220, that's addition. And then the retailer sells it to customer. Now he got to make his profit back from what he got from the wholesaler. So his price is 300, and he got to add his VAT, so that's 30. So the consumer at the end of the day, as you can see, would be the one that actually collects, has to pay the VAT that's included as the cost of everyone else. Now, from a business perspective, the thing is the VAT does get passed along to the consumer. But from a business perspective, if you're a business person, we say to persons, even if you're not over the limit, which is 100,000, you still have the opportunity to register for VAT because there are benefits for it. And we'll talk a little bit about those as we go on. But let me just give you another visual. Pray for me that the video don't do to me what it did earlier.
Hi, I'm Alex. Want to catch a movie? Now, I know what you're thinking. I clicked to watch a video about value-added taxes, not movies. Well, taxes and movies have more in common than you might think. They both generate revenue, they can be really complicated, and some are just blockbusters. Like our old friend, value-added tax, also known as VAT, or a goods and services tax. So, how do value-added taxes work? Let me explain. With popcorn, obviously. The corn starts out in a field with a farmer growing his crop. He sells it to a company that takes that corn and puts it in fancy packaging. Then, that company sells the packaged products to the cinema, and ultimately to the customer. Now, let's rewind and watch that again. And this time, let's assume that the country where all this is taking place has a 10% value-added tax. Here's how that works. Our farmer sells his popcorn for $10, but the packaging company buying it, they actually pay him $11. So why the extra dollar? Because that's the 10% VAT. That same thing happens again when the company sells the packaged popcorn to the cinema for a profit. So now the price is $15. But with the added 10% VAT, the cinema actually pays $16.50. And then, finally, the cinema sells the popcorn to the customer for $20. And that customer, once the VAT has been added, is paying $22. So far, so good. But here's an added ingredient that advocates of VAT say makes the system really work. And that's tax credit for businesses. A tax credit is just an amount that a business can subtract from the VAT it owes the government. VAT makes it so that while everyone on the supply chain pays their 10% in tax, they also get tax credits for whatever's already been paid by those selling to them. So, across the whole process, it's a flat rate of 10%. In the end, only the consumers actually pay the VAT since they aren't granted a credit. Oh, great, it's starting. Let's go. So the thing is, let's take this somewhere else. You may have noticed how popular that handsome actor was. Real star power. Well, that's kind of like value-added taxes. They're one of the biggest sources of tax revenue in the world. More than 160 countries have a VAT. Why? Well, there's less tax evasion. VATs are a built-in cost. So each business isn't just collecting the tax themselves. So they're motivated to report their taxes honestly to get those tax credits. And it's important that they do. While VAT rates are different in each country, the average VAT raises around a third of a country's tax revenue. So it's an important source of funding for everything from improving our infrastructure and countering climate change to creating equality and improving health and social safety nets. But just as with any movie, VATs have their critics. Some say that a VAT is unfair to poorer people because they spend most of their income, so they face a higher burden. But a lot of those concerns can be answered by using the money from VAT to help the most vulnerable. Some argue that reducing the VAT rate on basic food could be a solution, but it ends up benefiting those who don't need it and makes VAT collection more complex. That can be avoided by making sure that there's a single universal VAT rate and using progressive income taxes and cash transfers to support poorer households. And that's VAT. Cut. Feels like we could have gone for more of a Hollywood ending, right? That's VAT.
All right. Any questions so far with that part? Claire's mud or Claire's crystal?
Question. So if you said if you not making the 100,000, you still register?
We have two types of registry. One is mandatory and one is voluntary. But I don't want to jump ahead. But we will talk about that as well as we get into it. So even if you're not over the 100,000, you do have the ability to still register for VAT, which is actually a voluntary registration instead of the mandatory, where you go over the 100,000. Okay, so let me ask a fun question to the room. Who knows the difference between VAT and sales tax? Who knows, I can take it off the screen. Who knows the difference between VAT and sales tax? All my wonderful persons who like go shop in Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and all of the wonderful places in the US. What do you usually pay when you go inside JCPenney, Walmart, and all the rest? I can't list because Grammy them had me everywhere in the day. You pay sales tax. Okay. So, VAT, or value-added tax, is charged at every stage of the supply chain, from the manufacturer to the retail. But each business only pays tax on the value that they add. In contrast, sales tax is charged only once at the final point of sale to the consumer. So while VAT is built into prices throughout, sales tax is usually added at the end. I would ask the question, what do you think may be a better benefit for VAT than sales tax? Because the question has been asked, why don't we charge sales tax instead of VAT?
What was your question?
My question is, what would be one of the benefits of us actually doing VAT instead of actually doing sales tax? Because persons have asked, why don't we do sales tax or even an income tax? But what would be the benefit? And this is an open session. Don't feel that you have to be pressured to get the right answer. We're just talking as we go through the work as well.
Well, for me, I can speak from where I lived in Bermuda. They charge income tax. They don't have a VAT per se. So the higher your income, the more tax you have to pay. I suppose that would be something I would advocate would be more favorable. It may not seem fair per se, but more favorable. The VAT I'm still trying to understand. Sorry.
Okay, that's fine.
Repeat the question again?
The question was, why would we benefit with VAT versus doing sales tax?
Because VAT would have a broader coverage of goods and services as opposed to sales tax. It would only be on, I guess, food items and...
Sales tax, they in the US would charge sales tax on everything. They'll charge sales tax on you if they're going to charge sales tax on you.
But, so, can I ask a question then in regards to like income tax, right? Wouldn't it be a less coverage that you would exempt those of a lower, I guess, pay grade or bracket that they would use in the United States?
I honestly would not be able to answer that.
They
Right
don't
now.
exempt it. You were talking about income tax. It's just that people who make a higher figure
Pay
pay
more.
more.
But I
But they're
think
not exempted if you make.
if you make it minimum wage, I don't think it's fair to charge them income tax because they only make it minimum wage.
Okay.
It says everybody has to pay their role.
All right, hold on one sec for me.
Fair role. Let it 1%.
Yes. I humbly apologize. The system decided to do its own thing. Okay. Sorry about this. Presentation just shut down in the middle of. Okay. let's just continue on. We'll deal with the technical aspects of things. Humble apologies about that. We just had a slight technical issue where the laptop, I think, got excited with the discussion. And so, let's look a little bit at what I was talking about before, looking at why VAT and not sales tax. So, when we look at VAT, firstly, VAT is collected at every stage of the supply chain, whereas sales tax is only taxed once on the final sale. The other aspect, and one of the questions I was asking about, is the transparency with VAT. Because basically it's built in at every stage, which means if I as a business person want to make sure that I'm able to collect my VAT input, or I'm able to file to get my input, which will reduce my output for my sales, that means who I'm doing business with at the end of the day, I have to make sure that they're reporting clearly and that the VAT that they put on their business that they charge to me is clearly reported at the end of the day. Because one of the things, like I said, is you would subtract your input, which is basically any of your purchases from what your sales is, and that's what's actually remitted to the government. So one of the things that's built into the VAT is whoever I'm doing business with, once they are also a registered VAT registrant, their receipts also have to show and reflect that the VAT is actually on their receipts, because I need to be able to keep a record for myself, for my own business. That doesn't happen with the sales tax. Whatever they put on that at the end of the day, that's it. So if you purchase from somebody that's not a VAT registrant or only charges you sales tax, you in no way as a business person are able to recoup that back. This also comes to what you were asking about, sir, about being able to register for it even if you weren't over the threshold, because it's one of those things as a business that enables you to actually be able to file for VAT even though you're not over. And you actually get the benefits of it for when you have to purchase supplies and different things for your business. The other thing is business credit. So businesses can, of course, like I mentioned, claim input VAT, which is basically any supply that you purchase from another VAT registrant, you can actually use that to subtract from your overall VAT output, which is your sales. You can't reclaim or ask for VAT from somebody who doesn't charge you VAT. That's the simplest way. Now, this does in some ways encourage businesses to do business with other VAT registrants, but it doesn't mean a loss for any business that's not a VAT registrant. It just means as a business, you have the opportunity to claim back some of those that would reduce how much you actually pay to the government. Yes, ma'am.
So I have a question. So is VAT mandatory? Because I'm asking because you mentioned some people may not be a VAT registrant.
We'll get to that. I don't want to jump ahead. Okay. It is mandatory once you reach a certain threshold in your turnover. It does become mandatory.
Question.
Yes, sir.
So if I register and I buy all the supplies and stuff, even though it's not over the 100,000 threshold, I can get a portion of what I pay for.
Once the person you're purchasing from is also a VAT registrant, meaning they would be charging you VAT, it would reduce what you as the actual purchaser would actually have to pay for what you would have to pay to the government. Say, for example, your turnover enables you where you make $1,000 in VAT. That would have to go to the government. But then you purchase about $800 of VAT from supplies. So then what your actual calculation would be that $1,000 minus that $800. So what you actually would give to the government from your purchases would only be the $200 remaining. So that actually helps you to actually reduce at the end of the day. And it's no loss because it balances itself out. Okay? Also, the last part is better record keeping and accountability and minimal compliance measures for the sales tax, because a lot of times persons aren't required to keep their records versus when you do VAT, you want to keep good records. And that's one of the things we're trying to encourage persons in the public to actually do. If you need assistance, there's a lot of different persons and businesses that can help you in how you do your record keeping. There are a lot of different tools that you can actually use. And that'll be some of the things that we actually touch on as well as how to keep best record practices to make sure that at the end of the day, you're keeping good records. Even if you're not a VAT registrant, you want as a business to keep good records. Because if you decide to go for financing, you look for investors, those are the things that regardless of you being a registrant or not, just as a business person that they're going to look at the end of the day. Banks look at your records of how you've been keeping your records for your business in addition to what you actually make. It's not just a turnover. You could be making plenty of money, but then you have no records to properly support it. So they look at all of that. So that's one of the things with VAT that you're encouraged to do, to make sure you're keeping good records, because just like you asked, one of the things you want to make sure at the end of the day is when you have to file for your VAT, that you make sure you have all of your inputs versus your outputs, so that you at the end of the day also have the opportunity to reduce what you give to the government. And there are certain things we also talk about, like the flat rate and different things, but that's not today's session. That will be a part of some of the other sessions when we get into those as well. Okay, so a brief history. Now let's see if this is going to work with me or not. Okay. I'm going to close this a quick sec, Brandon. I'm going to open it back up. We're doing one today and one on Friday, but for the rest of the month, we may most likely have sessions every day, because some modules may take more than one day. So we will, if you, like I ask persons to make sure you do your email, so we could send to you the schedule, so you'll have an opportunity to actually see exactly which days and which modules are actually done. Okay.
So Friday, the different module.
Friday will most likely just be a continuation, and if we don't finish everything that we're doing today.
Do you have Wi-Fi here?
On open Wi-Fi, unfortunately, no. I do apologize. Okay. All right, so I'm just going to skip past this. Brandon, I'm just convinced that we're not supposed to show this part today. Okay. So, first of all, let me just mention that taxes have been around for almost 3,000 years. Started inside Egypt, was one of the first countries that actually started dealing with taxes. Along with Egypt, you had definitely Rome, Italy, Portugal, and a lot of the other nations that taxed their persons over the years that were in various shapes and various forms. VAT, on the other hand, started with France, which about 160 countries worldwide, including members of the European Union, Canada as GST, and parts of Asia, Africa, and Latin America that actually charge VAT. VAT is now a global standard for consumption taxation, and is praised for its transparency and its ability to generate revenue efficiently. Okay, so let me ask the question.
Although you said we have a question.
Hmm?
You said you have a question?
I have a question. No, I have a
I
question. You have a question too? Okay, I gotta ask my own first, and then I can let you ask yours. So my question is, when did VAT first start in the Bahamas? 2015, because we are celebrating our 10th anniversary of VAT inside the Bahamas. And so you're working together. So you got the year, she give you the month, January 2015. What was your question, Don?
What are the countries that make up the EU? And you say Canada as GST. What is GST?
GST would be, what's that, a global standard tax that they actually put on their products. Now, you asked the question of what all make up the EU.
At least 5.
You make me feel like I own things today. Okay.
I can research it.
A number of questions you would have would be France, Italy. Hey, she got me on YouTube searching inside the top of my mind today, right? You have Britain, France, Italy, I think Russia, and
Switzerland?
Switzerland would probably be one of them as well.
Okay, that's good. I can get the rest. Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Well, I think that's kind of the from the first slide that it was designed for after the tax evasion.
Consumption tax.
So it was to reduce tax evasion and something else. Oh, ensure more consistency. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Now, don't forget, we will be sharing the PDF of every module, so you will have a time to actually get these as well when we're done. Okay? Yeah, we ain't trying to be mean with the information. We want you all to actually have the information. Okay? So, VAT was implemented in Bahamas to modernize our tax system and ensure fiscal sustainability. I flashed it, now I'm taking it back. What was the first rate? Okay. What was the proposed rate after that? Oh, I thought everybody forget. It was going to be 15. But it actually became what after that? After and it's presently? And we also now have a change of? It's a smart class. I like this.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Why is the change necessary? For the change or the required change? It started 7.5 and ended at, well, it went to 12 or whatever. Now it's 5. Like, what's the, I don't know if you can answer that because the Prime Minister implemented it.
So,
No, but I mean, what's the reason for the change?
so the reason behind the changes, answering your question, the reason behind the changes was balancing the government revenue needs with the cost of living concerns with persons. Because when they were looking at doing it at 15 and 12%, they realized the effect that would have actually had on the public, which is why they had to bring it down. And they did bring it down to make sure that the revenue generated was still sustainable for what was needed, but also took in consideration the cost of living for persons, having it at 12 and 15. Some places, like France, actually charge, I think, 20 or 30% VAT.
So speak to VAT in relation to WTO.
I'm sorry, say it again?
Speak to VAT in relation to WTO.
Okay, that isn't a part of my presentation today. I'm sorry. But no, what I'm asking persons, though, as we are going through, if you do have a question that we cannot or don't answer at the time, just let us know and we will get the information for you. Okay? Okay, so the VAT has become one of our economy's main sources of revenue, replacing customs duties and its importance. And its importance. Meaning, at one point in time, the main revenue generator that we had when it comes to taxes was customs. Not just replacing it, eh? Not replacing it in terms of importance. So, that'll come back. Okay, so a brief history. Our timeline, of course, France implemented in 1950. We in the Bahamas implemented in 2015 at 7.5. In 2018, it increased to 12%. And in 2022, it was reduced back down to 10%. So I want to ask a question. What do you think our tax income looked like before we did VAT? Just an estimation, just a guess. The amount. Just a guess. Yeah. Mm-mm. Just dollar value. Okay. The question was, what did our tax income look like pre-VAT? So pre-VAT in 2014, our tax income was basically about $800 million. In 2022, we actually were up to about 1.4 billion in terms of our collection of revenue and taxes after implementing VAT.
So you have the 1.4 billion.
That was in 2022.
B, the B.
That's
They were
2022.
doing it more than that when they, wasn't there? More than 1.4 billion.
No, ma'am.
According to this, it's saying that, but
Can't see. Okay. Okay. So, VAT as a revenue generating tool. Any questions so far? Because I don't want to feel like I'm just rushing through and going through quickly. Any questions so far?
I didn't like questions. I wanted to ask, what is the national debt? As I'm made to understand that that was implemented to offset some of the.
no, she reduced, not offset.
What it was,
It was implemented to reduce the national debt, not offset it.
Okay. So, VAT is the one of the most efficient ways for governments to collect revenue from goods and services. It ensures a steady cash flow by taxing consumption. VAT is reliable because it's collected at multiple stages, making it harder to evade. In the Bahamas, VAT has become one of the primary sources of public revenue. It's one of the things, like I was saying before, with the businesses. So, if I do service with you, my good sir, and you do service with the lovely lady next to you, you want to make sure at the end of the day her records are in order, because what she does is going to affect how you take your income tax, or you take your VAT, sorry, not income tax, your VAT. It's the same thing with you. You go to your wholesaler, you won't just take any record from them, because when you got to bring your stuff in from customs and everything else, you need to make sure when you have to file for your VAT that your records are in order. So it isn't as easy when you're dealing with persons that are actually registered and dealing with VAT to hide things within taxes or hide things, because at the end of the day, everything has to be transparent and up to board. Yes.
Is there a cap on how much you can reclaim within VAT taxes? You know how you used the example of owing the government $1,000 in VAT, but spending $800 in VAT, which means you would only have to give $200. Is there a cap on this amount?
On how much you actually pay back to the government, or how much you actually able to reclaim? Which one?
Yeah, on both.
It's based on your turnover. It's based on your turnover.
Okay.
So, and as we get to it, we'll talk about the different levels of what persons pay in regards. But what you're going to pay inside your turnover for, say, 200,000, it's not going to be the same thing that someone's at 5 million. It's not going to be the same thing as somebody at 20 million. So it's really based on what you generate
So
as a
there is
company in
no
the
cap.
business.
Oh.
Okay, so VAT is primarily governed by the following legislations and regulations. Although persons think we can do what we want, we cannot. We are governed by laws and by rules. A lot of the taxes and the tax laws I'll also show during the presentation, where it's actually on our website. I hate people saying Bahamians don't like read. I don't believe that's true. It's just that sometimes knowing where the information is to make it easier makes a difference. So a lot of the rules and the billings and amendments are on our website as well. So Value Added Tax Act in 2014, the primary legislation establishing the VAT system in the Bahamas, and it outlines the VAT registration requirements, the taxable supplies, your input and output tax, your filing and payment obligations, as well as basically the powers of the comptroller of VAT, and regularly updated through amendments to make any changes, like the changes you asked about in 2018 and 2022, because those had to be passed through law before they could have even considered reducing the actual thing. And I'm just going to ask the question, does anybody know who the comptroller of VAT is? You just got to ask me that? That's right. It's Mr. Simon Wilson. He is actually the comptroller of VAT. Our financial secretary, that is the financial secretary.
So is the financial controller the VAT controller, or
So the financial secretary is also the comptroller of VAT.
Okay.
In our building, we have who's in charge here, Ms. Shonda Strond, who is the Chief Valuation Officer for the Department of Inland Revenue. So she oversees what happens here, but he's actually in charge of that and the other finances. A lot of times persons mix up the two. Shonda Strong, Acting Chief Valuation Officer. Okay. So the Value Added Tax Regulations 2014 also provides detailed procedures to support the VAT Act, and it covers VAT invoicing formats, filing frequency, record keeping requirements, and specific rules for different types of supplies, examples, goods and services. And our Financial, Administrative, and Audit Act governs how the government revenue, including VAT, are collected, managed, and audited. And it assures accountability and proper use of public funds, including those generated from VAT. Our annual finance bills and budget, of course, are used to amend the VAT rates or thresholds as announced during the national budget. Example, the 2018 VAT rate increased to 12%, and then again the 2022 when it actually had to go back down. So, purpose and uses of VAT. I always make the joke at the end of the day, I got a couple of potholes I need fixed too. Let me just throw that out there, okay? So, some of the things we use the VAT for, of course, includes education, healthcare, infrastructure, public safety, and for every government worker, that little thing we need at the end of the month. It is what it is.
Hold on, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am. It ain't about the little thing at the end of the month, right?
I'm just confused. So this isn't this just is in, I mean, because when you had an amount of money getting borrowed every budget, pardon me? Yeah, so I mean, I really trying to not say the wrong thing, especially how this is being recorded, right? So I'm trying to, if this VAT money is used to fund these essential public services, this information, I listen to the budget all the time, and I've never heard VAT being used for these purposes. I stand to be corrected. But is this VAT money used in addition to the money that they borrowed? Or, what was going on here?
So, let's look at revenue generation. We've talked about customs being one of our main tax is that we generate. We have things that come from sales of properties and different things that you get VAT stuff, real property. So all of the taxes go into a consolidated fund. And out of that consolidated fund, VAT is a part of that consolidated fund, as well as the tariffs that you will get from customs and other things. So when the government actually pays from that one pot, it includes this and everything else that goes at the end of the day.
Now, 1 + 1 is 2.
Let me ask you one question. Can I ask you one
Okay.
question?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, in 2015, when I know before 2015, there are a lot of town meetings around the place. Very little people attended those. But I was one of the places going to here and then, 7 places in town meetings. And it was always told to us that VAT was being implemented to bring down
The national
or
debt.
alleviate some of the national debt. Okay? Now, I made a comment a couple minutes ago when I said that in 2022, we collected $1.something billion towards VAT. But when I checked, when I was checking through from 2015 going right up, the first 2 years, we made at least $4 million out of that. When I began to check around, and I see that, and I started to check only for the first, let me say 2 to 4 years, not one penny that was collected for that was paid towards to bring down the national debt. And persons around the Bahamas always ask.
You know that question? Hey, you know that question? You know that question I tell you at the very beginning that I dare not touch because I didn't get. You know the question I asked where the VAT money going? I ain't even go with all that today.
Because I'm saying to the state, they said, government want us to be accountable to them. When are they going to be accountable to us?
Now,
Because
my-
this
You can't
training,
answer that question.
I
know.
can.
But I'm just saying, in this setting,
And it's okay to ask.
in this setting,
Yes, ma'am.
like one leader said, he had never seen the implementation of VAT in any country. Cause that country getting better. If anything, we get worse. Because every year, from VAT came in, we borrowing and
we borrowing more and more and more and more.
more.
And then you're saying that VAT is supposed to be transparent, and it's really not.
Well, I
And
would
I'm not, I know that you are in a difficult
Eh?
position. I'm not trying to place you in a difficult position, but I am thinking that the powers that be is listening. And I need them to know that we are aware and alert, and we have questions that we want answered. And I'm hoping that maybe they can put some of this information into the public domain to help us answer questions. It will help them to be transparent, more transparent in their claiming.
I will say this the easiest way I can. For every representative that you have for your different areas, these are the things that you have to address with them. No, but I'm just saying, this is not the forum where I can actually address those
But
things.
we just throw it out to you, know that you can't, you just training.
You're just trying to throw me in the hot pot. I appreciate it.
So this comes under the Ministry of Finance?
Yes, ma'am.
Economic affairs,
So
right?
pen a
No,
letter.
finance.
To the Minister, the Prime Minister. Yes, pen a letter to your representative, pen a letter to your Prime Minister. Y'all two get an answer because.
All right.
If the
So-
Bahamas had that fully implemented, you could go online and find out all of these agreements, all of these.
Because I have an issue with coming into settings like this, and you just giving me information and it's nothing to confirm what you say. You know, that kind of way, like how the lady brought up, well, for the first 4 years, X, Y, Z is the case. So I understand that you may not be aware, but as they go and they rewatch these things, maybe they can address it in different settings.
Okay.
Already said a number of times, you ask a question, you get the answer. You know, privilege.
Yeah.
To state it.
No.
As far as-
Yeah.
And at the same time, research is always changing. So at the same time, if there's information that needs to be updated and corrected, then that will be done outside of it. Okay. As we were. So along with infrastructure, we also look at public safety. And then some of the, of course, is compensation of employees, funding for public services like compensation of employees, use of goods and services, public debt, interest, subsidiaries, grants, social assistance, pensions and gratuities, and other payments. Y'all ain't gonna throw me under the bus for that one. Y'all ain't gonna throw me under the bus for that one. So, the purpose and uses of VAT. First of all, it's encouraging formalization and compliance. Y'all be hearing saying easy, but I love y'all nonetheless. VAT incentives businesses to operate within the formal economy, only registered, and let me say this again, and I will keep saying it, only registered businesses can claim input VAT, but also only registered businesses can charge VAT.
VAT registered businesses or any registered business?
Let me say this again, only VAT registered businesses.
So only VAT registered businesses, whether or not you would have gotten your business license for any particular year, once you register it, you have to collect VAT.
You have to collect VAT and pay it.
Or not.
Yes,
And you have to be making over $100,000 per year.
not necessarily. That is, we're talking about mandatory versus voluntary. So, hey, I don't want to jump ahead.
Okay.
I don't want to jump ahead.
Yes.
Okay, so, but I need to hammer this point again because it's something I said earlier, even internally for us. If you go to a business and at the end of the day, they are charging you VAT, and first of all, you don't see a business license that's up to date, that's already a violation. And secondly, you don't see a VAT certificate that is shown. First of all, they have to have that VAT certificate where you can see it. You can be polite and ask, but the reality of it is that's supposed to be displayed.
So when is it issued?
The VAT certificate, once you actually have applied for your VAT certificate, it usually doesn't take long. for registration to get your VAT certificate. But I don't want to give a specific time, but honestly, once you've registered, it doesn't take long. We want,
I asked about it several times before, but we never got one.
did you apply? Okay, I'll speak offline and see what we can do with that.
I remember like in the early stage of inland revenue, thing, you could have put in, when you put in your business license, I thought it automatically came with like this box.
It's an option. It is actually an option that, and I will say this, it's an option where sometimes persons actually do make the mistake of registering for VAT when they're putting in for their business license. So you can actually do it at the same time, but it's only required if your business is actually generating over 100,000. Okay? Before your next question comes, because I ain't trying to have you all there until 4:30. Okay.
And I wonder why the business owner step business license and say I doing transactions with other companies that have the VAT, but even though I'm not, or I guess that's a dumb question because I'm not ready.
It's not a dumb question.
Like, that's having your business
No.
license and I don't make that 100,000 threshold, could I still?
So, before we, and I said this again, we're going to come to that. Because there's an explanation I want to give and clear up when we are touching on the mandatory versus the voluntary aspect of the VAT registration. And it's something that we have to make sure it's clear, because a lot of persons do ask the question pertaining to that. So, and I said it again, if they are not registered, and I started a statement, sorry, the question threw me off a sec. You do not have to pay them VAT if you don't see that certificate. And if it's anything, let us know. You can't be charging the public VAT and you don't, first of all, have a VAT certificate shown, because that's already inside itself a compliance issue and it's illegal. And secondly, if they cannot produce a VAT certificate to show the fact that they're registered for VAT, they should not be charging
That's
VAT.
confusing me right there, because when they came to my business, they said they wanted to see the business license. I produced that.
Yes.
Then the lady, and it was supposed to be of them, and they asked me for the VAT certificate. I said, you all didn't give me one.
Are you charging VAT?
Yeah.
You shouldn't be charging VAT if you don't have a VAT
So
certificate.
they said to me, where is the VAT certificate? So I said, you all didn't give me one. You know what they told me? I should make it up myself and let's put it up. I said, excuse me. I said, I asked you one. I asked that. You know what you were saying?
Ma'am, you see my facial expression? We'll talk off camera.
Yes, we will.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I'm not now let me just say this. I'm trying to get through the presentation, so I want to answer your questions, but I don't want time to run up off of you as
It's a
well.
quick one.
Yes.
So if I leave here and I go in the store and they don't have a VAT certificate and they're charging me, is there a WhatsApp number that I can just take a picture or a hotline that I can call?
604
Y'all wait to go in the Chinese.
82 604 8241. That's my desk number. And then 225 7280. 280. That's our regular line, but I've also given you my desk line. Now, as you can see, I do in training. So if I don't answer right away, that doesn't mean I will not get to your calls.
One aspect is the VAT is a every stage process added thing. How could a company like the retailer now, because retailer, they have need VAT, but they how to, but I mean, it's a part of their,
Can you repeat what you said?
Our question is, if as a retailer you have to pay VAT to somebody else, aren't you automatically required then to actually charge persons VAT? You're jumping ahead again. And I don't want to keep saying it, but there are certain things we want to get to, and that'll be a part of it. But that's a good question, though. Okay. So creates level playing field, encourage transparency. So our growth in our VAT revenue, since administration 2015, VAT has become a cornerstone of the Bahamas' revenue system. In the first half of 2024-2025, VAT collections total about $663.1 million, accounting for 51.3% of total tax revenues. This represents a growth of 17.1 million compared to the same period in the previous year and equates to 43.7% of the annual budget. The increase of VAT contributes as being a boon to the national revenue, even with the rate adjustments. VAT has helped in bolstering the country's fiscal health in a lot of ways. Okay, so our increase in VAT registrants, the number of businesses registered for VAT has seen a consistent uptick, reflecting both economic growth and improved compliance. As of October 1st, 2023, the taxpayer registration list includes numerous businesses across various sectors, indicating widespread participation in the VAT system. There has been an expansion of tax base due to more businesses entering the VAT system, and the increased registration enhances revenue collection and promotes fair competition amongst businesses. For me, I like to say and encourage persons, because at the end of the day, I looking for the 5 million persons inside the room, including myself. Or only one us, two us. I looking to be the 5 million business at the end of the day. But the idea is you can see the growth because of the number of businesses persons are actually registering, and also the number of VAT registrants that you're getting at the end of the day. I got a couple of people online put their hand up too. I would show it.
Quick question, is there a list that you have of VAT registrant from your aspect?
Yes. We do have list. We do actually have on our website a list of VAT.
No, I mean just to check in case you
No, we do have on our website a list of VAT registrants for businesses that are registered for VAT, for you to be able to see who are actually VAT registrants. To streamline the tax process, so we implemented the system online, our OTAS system, to streamline the tax process and enhance compliance. The Bahamas introduced the online tax system on October 15, 2014, and the OTS offers services as taxpayer registration, return filing, payments, and refund processing. The OTS has simplified tax administration both for taxpayers and the government. And the digital platform has helped in improving efficiency, reducing errors, and facilitating timely compliance. And we do know a lot of times persons do get intimidated, honestly, when it comes to technology, which is why we're doing sessions like this, to go through the process, to educate persons on how to use the platform, and even when it comes to making their payments, how to make sure they're making their payments to the right account and things along those lines. Okay. And our VAT progress in the Bahamas are enhanced compliance enforcement measures. The government has intensified enforcement efforts, leading to notable improvements in compliance. And it also comes back to both us, the department, and also you, the public. If you come in a business and you don't see no business license, because I ain't gonna lie to you, when I go inside my barber shop, the first thing I look for was his business license and make sure he's compliant after he cut my hair. He wasn't messing up my fade, okay? But the reality of it is you also have a responsibility. If you go into a business and they are charging you VAT and they do not have a VAT certificate, report it to us. We want to make sure that businesses are treating the public fairly at the end of the day and are being compliant, because then it's unfair to the other businesses that are being compliant, that persons are doing skullduggery. All right, so we are going to take it's 2:33. We're going to take a quick 10-minute break. Just need to make some quick adjustments, and then we'll continue the session. It's probably only going to take probably another 30 minutes or so once we're back to continue on. All right. All right, so we are back from our break. I've prayed over this laptop, so all of the demons that was running at it, hopefully they're going off of it. Yeah,
Lady tell me that you're in charge of the show.
in the shoals? Boy, she misrepresented me bad then. Okay, so let's look at VAT in business operations. VAT inclusive versus VAT exclusive pricing. Understanding how to price goods and services correctly under VAT is crucial for compliance and transparency. Our key points: VAT inclusive pricing. The displayed price includes VAT. Common in retail settings where prices on shelves and menus show the total amount the customer pays, businesses must clearly indicate that prices are VAT inclusive. That means when you go to a place and you purchase an item, a good or service, if they are a VAT registrant, they need to have on that receipt showing the fact of what their tin is, the items that are itemized, and also they need to show the VAT that you're paying. Even now with the 5% on goods, on consumable goods, you have to make sure that the receipts reflect both. So some places may actually be charging 5% on certain things and 10%. So you want to make sure when you're looking at the receipts at the end of the day, as a consumer, that you're being charged at the right rate.
Okay, I asked that to the value the other day when I went there. We have T1 and T2.
So
One is the 5% and one is the
10%.
So I was asking them, wasn't it supposed to have at the bottom the total for the T1, and then whatever the VAT is for T1, and then the total for T2, and
The receipt, when the receipt,
so they charge you the 5% plus the 10% at the end of the day.
you was going to say something? Oh, the receipt. When you looked at the receipt, you said the receipt had T1 and T2, which indicated that it was 5% and the 10%. At the bottom of the receipt, it gave you a total of actually everything, or you were looking for a total of. Once they're indicating the difference between the 5% and the 10%, that should be fine, because you should be able to know the difference with the items. And we do have the listing on our website, correct? Of the bills with the 72 pages. No, I'm mentioning that because, see, a part of it is also with the consumer education to make sure, because the bill has almost 72 something pages. We cannot go through all of those. But the idea is for you to have an idea of when you are purchasing your stuff to know exactly at the end of the day. Yes. So that way you'll know what you're paying for with the VAT and the taxes based on those particular items.
5% for T1.
Instead of 10%.
At the bottom, and then I got the total invoice.
Yes.
Then you see a total VAT. I don't know if it's 5, they charge me the total, or it's 10. I don't know because it doesn't break it down. It just tell it be.
It should be separated, yeah. Okay.
I think that was the question. I saw that on Facebook. That's the full story you're talking about. I saw people asking that question as well.
Of showing the totaling.
Who obviously don't know how to calculate or aren't familiar with the terminology. How are they satisfied that they're not being, like she said, probably there's a little mistake in the calculation. Shouldn't it specify this is, let's say, $3, 10%, this is.
Consumer affairs will have to go and tell and make sure.
To look at those
their
receipts, yeah.
Receipts is formatted.
The way that
according
is
to
supposed to be.
That's not in our
Yeah.
regulation.
So,
No, but it is a question.
It is. I saw it online.
so, in addition to that, we have our exclusive pricing, VAT exclusive pricing, and the displayed price excludes VAT, which is added at the point of sale, often used in business-to-business transactions where the purchaser can reclaim VAT. Invoices should clearly state the VAT amount separately. So, even in answering to what you actually said, if I'm dealing with another business and I have to claim my inputs for VAT, I actually need the invoice that they're saying on the receipt to show what the VAT actually is, so that I'm actually able to distinguish the difference. Because the truth being told now, certain items are 5%, certain items are 10%. When I have to do my VAT filing, there's a line now that's actually being added where I have to put certain items for my 5% and certain items for my 10%. So that's something that actually is required for you to actually show the difference between the totals between the amounts, because when I have to do my input, where I'm purchasing from you as another vendor, I need to be able to see that to be able to distinguish that. Yes. Okay. So, VAT inclusive, a retailer say purchases a product at $100, the amount includes VAT. So the actual product price is approximately $90.91, with $9.09 being VAT, assuming that the VAT rate is 10%. On the receipt, what you should actually see is the retail price, the VAT indication, and then the total that would include both of them. VAT exclusive, or wholesaler lists a product for $100 at sale. The VAT is added, making the total $110. It's important to clearly communicate pricing structures to customers so that they can maintain transparency and trust, and misrepresentation of pricing can lead to compliance issues. So that just means whoever you're going to when you're doing business, to get an idea of how they're actually having their stuff structured, so when you get the receipt, you understand how it's actually done with that particular business. Because you don't want to say that they're not giving it to you and showing it to you, but they have their receipt structured inside a particular way. Okay, so let's talk about invoicing and bookkeeping requirements. So proper documentation is essential for VAT compliance and facilitates accurate record keeping and reporting. Key points: VAT invoices must include the words VAT invoice prominently displayed, the supplier's name, address, and tax identification number or their TIN, the customer's name and address if they're registered for VAT, and this is for business to business that do VAT, unique invoice number and date, description of the goods or services, quantity and unit price of the goods or service, and the total amount excluding the VAT, like the retail cost, then the VAT rate applied, then the total VAT amount, and the total amount including VAT. So when you look at the receipt, you should be able to see what the breakdown of everything actually is with the price, so if there is a dispute, because the reality of it is sometimes people double charge you on an item. Yes. So you want to be able to see what things are at the end of the day in that regards. Bookkeeping practices. We encourage, and I say this again, we encourage persons, if you need assistance, there are a lot of accountants, bookkeepers, and persons that can assist you. There are a lot of tools, whether it's an electronic bookkeeping and different things to help you maintain your bookkeeping records. I know a lot of persons like to just keep their analog receipts and stuff, but the reality of it is those receipts wear out quickly too. So I would encourage persons, always try to digitize what you do. Even if you don't use something like QuickBooks or some other invoice, scan your stuff so that you can have your receipts at the end of the day, because that will last longer than a receipt that you go, because you go to any chicken place and a little bit of grease get on your receipt. By the time you don't look at that, that's already gone. So you want to try to also include best practices to scan your stuff to try to keep your receipts, especially if you're a business that practices and deals in VAT, to make sure at the end of the day you have the records that you need. Oh, and the last thing I want to mention is to keep the records for a minimum of 5 years as required by law. It used to be 7, it's now 5, to make sure when you have to do your audits at the end of the day, you have the records you need. So let's look at some deadlines and procedures. Timely and accurate filing of VAT returns is mandatory to avoid penalties and interest charges. Key points: filing frequency. Monthly filings are required for businesses with annual tax sales exceeding $5 million. Quarterly filings are permitted for businesses with annual taxable sales below $5 million, though they may opt for monthly filings if preferred. Submission dates for VAT returns must be filed within 21 days following the end of each tax period, and payments are due at the same time as the return submission. And our payment methods can be made through the commercial banks or online via the tax administration portal. So let me just take a quick moment to indicate here. Please make sure you have the right banking information when you are filing for your VAT. I think us alone may have maybe about, almost 6 to maybe 12 different bank accounts for different aspects. If you're doing your real property tax, there's a bank account for that. If you're doing your VAT stamp, there's a bank account for that. So you need to make sure that you have the correct banking information for the VAT that you're filing. A lot of times, and persons make the mistake, so let me say this publicly. If I get fired for it, they'll have to come looking for me. I like Three Musketeers. Let me just throw that out there. That may comfort me. But the reality of it is, please do not file on the 21st. Make your payment at the bank, and then expect that it's going to hit the account on time. You will get a late fee because the bank itself, we cannot account for anything that doesn't hit our accounts until it actually hits our account. And if the bank takes 2 to 3 days, that's not on the department. So you have to make sure if you're going to file, and I know we have a culture last minute, and we got to work on that. If you know that it's going to take 2 to 3 days for the bank, then you have to make your payment in time, so when it reflects to us, at the end of the day, it reflects in a timely manner so that you don't get those late fee charges.
What are the late fee charges?
I'll get to that. I can get to that. I'll get to that.
And then you, it's like one like me, well, a couple of times I just go to the bank and make my payment. And then it might give a little white number, box, account number. They didn't send it there. And so, when they was checking, they was telling me I owe this money. And I came and I go up there, I pay. And when they check people, the bank send it to the wrong place.
And this is why it's important to make sure you
I
keep your
went to the
records.
bank and asked them to reroute this money. And then they wanted to charge me a fee. But had I not been the person I am, I tell them there's no way I would have been able to fee for that.
So, for those persons that are listening online, the statement was at the end of the day, the payment was made on time and it was applied to the wrong actual account by the bank. This is why we're encouraging persons, keep your records and keep your receipts at the end of the day. We can't validate something without proof. And so we encourage persons to keep their proof. And with all these smartphones, it's very easy. You get a receipt, take a picture. If you could take all these selfies, you could take a picture of your receipt at the end of the day.
The unfortunate thing with the smartphone is everybody doesn't know to play anymore.
So you're saying that you should have a separate bank account just for that, a separate account just for.
No. What I'm saying is the Department of Inland Revenue, for each of the different type of payments we have separate accounts.
Oh, okay.
We have separate accounts that your things has to go to at the end of the day. And when you make your payments, one, make it in a timely manner so it doesn't apply to your account late, and two, keep your records. So if anything does happen, because the reality of it is human error happens. But once you have your proof to show that you did something in a particular way and at a particular time, then that can be assisted. We can't assist for something that you don't have any record for. We preparing audit. Regular audits ensure compliance and accuracy in VAT reporting. Being prepared can facilitate a smoother audit process. Audit triggers discrepancies between reported figures and actual transactions. Consistent late filings or payments, random selection by tax authorities or part of the routine compliance check, and preparation tips. All ensure all records are complete, accurate, and up to date. Reconcile VAT returns with financial statements regularly. Train staff on VAT compliance and record-keeping procedures, and consult with tax professionals to conduct internal reviews and identify potential issues before an official audit. Let me just ask a question. What amount, business license renewal, do you need to have a accountant certification? Anybody knows? No. 250,000. When you're applying for your business license renewal, you over 250,000, you have to have accounting certificate. Over 5 million, you need to have a audit that's done by a biker.
And at the end of the time, they told me I needed to bring in the accountant names and all that provider. And so that was 250.
No, it's changed where it's 250. But notice I said this is also for the business license renewal. And the reason I mention it, because of course, with your business license renewal, your VAT filing would also in some ways be tied to what you're actually filing in that regards of your turnover. So 250,000, you're required to have an accountant certification. 5 million and above, you are required to have an actual audit from a biker accountant. It can't be Annie Lusu down the road who says she's good with math. Yes.
So it's certified, not
A biker. A biker certified. Yes, it must be a biker certified accountant.
I think because I did for several years at one time, they told me to bring in a letter and her name and whatnot.
Okay.
So clarity, is any accounting certification okay? Because I know.
Have to be a biker registered. Now, sorry, this is for the 250,000 below, or this is over? For 5 million over, it has to be a biker certified. For below, if it's a CPA, that's an accountant, they have their license and everything, that should be fine.
I was getting IFRS because we don't really need that in the Bahamas. CPA
International.
Yeah.
UK.
Yeah, so
Yes.
it's IFRS. Like, is that okay too?
I'll find it for you. I don't want to misquote on that. So, may you just make note of that for me, please? All right, so this was VAT registration. So this is one of the things I wanted to definitely speak about, both for persons in the room and the persons online. So let me just ask this question. What do you actually pay VAT on?
What do you service?
What do you pay VAT on?
Services and goods.
That's not what I mean. In terms of your license, what do you actually pay VAT on?
Good.
That's not what I'm talking about. I'm asking this question for a particular reason. See, a lot of times we think it's the business license that you're actually paying VAT on. It is not. It's your TIN, your TIN, your tax identification number. And the reason it's your TIN is, say, my good lady, you're a sole proprietor and you have 10 different businesses under that one TIN. Because see, your TIN will be for the different groupings. So say you're a sole proprietor, every business that you start yourself as a sole proprietor would go under that one TIN. Under that one TIN, and this is where a lot of persons ask about the 100,000, and sometimes persons get mixed up with it, so I want to try to clearly explain it. If you have 10 different businesses and each of them make $10,000, collectively they make how much? 100,000. So what happens a lot of times is persons say, well, my business only make 5,000. My business only make 20,000. My business only make 30,000, because they look at the singular individual businesses. But what you're actually paying VAT on is the TIN, not the business license by itself. So if you got Annie Sue Chicken Shack, Annie Sue Shoe Shine, Annie Shoe Hair Supply, Hair Grease, and everything else, collectively those businesses will add up to that 100,000, and then you're required to register every last one of those businesses under that TIN, and you have to charge VAT. So now, example, you two lovely ladies decide to get together and have a partnership. That's a separate TIN, because that's a different entity. It's not longer a sole proprietorship. And if your business is only as a partnership making $50,000, do you pay VAT on that? You don't. But you would pay VAT on the other one. Now suppose all of us in there, who is the 5 million people, decide to get together and we decide that we're going to do a limited company. That is another TIN, because it's another entity. And if that is over the thresholds, then you would pay VAT on that. You would pay VAT on the sole proprietorship, but the partnership which isn't over. So this is important that we're explaining this with the VAT registrant, because a lot of times persons say, well, my business isn't making that. But if you are making 99,999.99 and you have one business that make $1, that's your sole proprietorship, and pushes you over, then all of those businesses under that particular TIN have to both register for VAT and then are required to pay VAT and charge VAT, I should say. So that is how the mandatory VAT registration works. It's what is under the TIN. So if you have one business and that's over, then that's the one business. If you have 2 and 3 businesses, but collectively those 2 and 3 businesses go over the 100,000, then you're required to register for VAT. That is our VAT mandatory registration. What we encourage persons to also do is, if you know you are reaching the threshold in your third quarter, you say you at 80,000, 90,000, and the business doing well, you don't tell me in the last quarter you make $0. We would encourage you at that point to basically register for the VAT, because then at that point, at the end of the day, then at that point we know that you're approaching it, so we would encourage you to register voluntarily so that you don't have anything that apply. Banks make money. I'm sorry. I'll have to look at that last one. Okay. In addition to registering mandatory, there's also a voluntary registration, and I mentioned this before. You don't have to be over the 100,000. You can still register, and it gives you the benefit as a business at the end of the day to still claim the same outputs and inputs as a business. Now, the one thing I would say is this. As long as you are registered for VAT, you are required to file for VAT. Because some businesses, when they start off and they're over the 100,000 and they have a bad year or 2 years and they drop below, they feel like, well, I don't have to file. No. As long as you are registered, you're required to file. If you choose, because you see that your business will no longer be over that threshold, then you have to write into us to make that request to be removed. Otherwise than that, you will find yourselves incurring penalties and fees for the fact that you are already registered for VAT. And at the same time, sometimes we have to force register for persons, because when they actually put in for their business license and their turnovers, it shows the fact that at the end of the day, that they're actually over. And let me just say this in the public forum, We don't like to have to use certain compliance things to come after people. We rather persons be honest and compliant voluntarily. Don't try and hide the fact at the end of the day. You know you having concerts and different things all years. You know your revenue over 200,000, but you're trying to file that you only make $10,000. Y'all think it's customs? Say, God forgive me. But on a serious basis, we want persons at the end of the day to be compliant voluntarily because it makes it easy for them as well as it makes it fairer for the other businesses that are being compliant at the end of the day and for the consumers at the end of the day. Okay. Go ahead.
For a couple of years while I was in a small business symposium, there, came up policies also. And we were, as a small business, we were trying to figure out the 100,000, is it a concession or is it an allowance that government? Okay, that's what we were saying. I know a lot of big businesses come in and government give all of them these concessions, and the big businesses get all the concessions, the small business not going to get nothing. So we were trying to say, is this 100,000 a concession where we could say, this is what I'm allowed not to pay back to the government?
It's not a concession. It's actually, as you see, VAT Act 2014. It's a law.
So it's back to the thing that we as small businesses get nothing. The big business people, they get everything. Because they get incentives from government. That's theirs. To help our small businesses be higher, be even too.
I would say this. When it comes to what concessions you can or cannot get as a business, including the fact of being able to file for your inputs and your outputs, because the reality of it is you may be a small business and say your inputs outweigh your outputs. That means that you're in a position whereas you can apply for a refund. So it isn't the fact that at the end of the day there is not a benefit to being registered even if it's your small business. That is also an opportunity. Okay. Well, that.
Once we get 100,000 plus $1, then we will start paying tax on the whole 100,000 plus the $1.
Okay.
And we were saying that, why are we paying it? Well, we just pay it starting with the 101,000 going out, we pay. Let's say I made 130,000 for this year. Why don't I just pay
That would be something. That would be something that would have to be changed within the law aspect.
That was the
Yeah. So. Yeah, that's something that we wouldn't be able to change or address. That's something that would have to be done, from the law aspect. So, additionally, promoters of public entertainment activities must also register for VAT if they expect their taxable supplies to meet or exceed $50,000 per annum. I would also encourage persons on our website, and I'll show it before the presentation is finished, where they can look at some of the legal aspects, the acts, and the amendments. When you have time to review, because some of the questions you have are things that are going to be inside the act pertaining to some of the benefits and different things that go along with it, because we can only glaze over some of them today. Because like I say, this is just more an introductory today, and someone is asking, where can I find a list of acceptable deduction expenses between businesses? So I'll make that reference when we go to the website as well. Okay. So for VAT registration and pertaining to the different returns, so petty will be anything up to $99,999, which would be a quarterly return. Very small would be between $100,000 to $399,999, and I'm just going to skip through these. Medium would be about basically $1 million to $4,999,000 on quarterly returns, and large would be basically $5 million to $19,999,000 plus. And I intend to be in the last one, very large, $20 million. So we also have a large taxpayers unit for persons that usually make $5 million or more, and those persons usually would file on a monthly basis, but that is by invitation. Not everybody, just because they go over the $5 million, that is something that depends on how they are registered and their status in that regards. Okay. So all VAT filing and payment due dates, all VAT returns and payments are due 21 days after the end of the filing period. However, large taxpayers who are approved and accepted into the large taxpayer units have 14 days after the filing period. All of the other large taxpayers have 21 days. A quarterly period such as January to March will be due on April 21st, A monthly period such as January will be due on February 21st, and if due dates fall on a weekend, the return and payment is due on the next business day. So, we were talking about this a little earlier. All unprepared foods will have a reduced VAT rate of 5% beginning from April 1st. It was not an April Fool's joke like some persons actually thought it was real. And these items are intended for consumption sold in their original state. And there will be, like I mentioned earlier, on the VAT actual filing, new lines for the 5% and for the 10% for the input and output. This is why it's very important to make sure at the end of the day, the receipts and the invoices that you get from any other VAT registrant you do business with shows the breakdown, because you're going to need that information in those figures as well for your own record keeping and for your filing at the end of the day. Okay. This was an answer to the question you asked. A late VAT return submission will result in a fine greater of the sum of $100 or 2% of the tax payable. Payments made after the deadline will incur a fee of 10% of the total tax owed. This is in VAT Act 2014, reprinted Section 47A3. The taxpayer will incur interest on the outstanding balance at a rate of prime plus 1%. That answers the question. Okay, so penalties, just discuss that. So submission of supporting documents. So to maintain compliance, submit support when filing the VAT return. This is why it's also important we encourage persons to keep good records. Taxpayers must provide records along with other documents related to their taxable activities. Taxpayers are also required to retain these records for 5 years following the conclusion of the tax period. Okay, so I mentioned it a little earlier. So on our website, this is inlandrevenue.finance.gov.bs. And no, I didn't just look at the pop-up to remember it. I do remember it off the top of my head. Give me some credit. You're able to go to the VAT section at the top where it says value-added tax. And there what you will see is different information that requires. When you go to the legal section, it will give you the general VAT guides, industry-specific guides, the VAT Act, the amendments, the regulations, the rules, and any advanced ruling, as well as information pertaining to VAT for any of your questions and stuff that you may have that is not necessarily covered. Okay, I mentioned this earlier again. So, pertaining to your payments, the same thing. You want to make sure that you are looking at the right account. The account, the beneficiary would be GOB, VAT account, with all of the rest of the information. Please, 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 just like you mentioned yourself, you made your payment, but they applied it to the wrong account. So you want to make sure when you're applying your payments that you are sending the payments to the correct accounts at the end of the day, so that your payments can be applied on a timely basis and you don't get any late fees or anything else. And we encourage persons to monitor the portal. Our portal is one of the main ways, and a lot of times persons say they send emails, they make calls. Just like I gave you our number, there are times you may not reach us on the phone, but we do our dire best to follow up with that. But with the portal that you actually have access to, this is where a lot of persons will get a faster response in messaging through the portals because it's monitored on a daily basis. So we encourage persons to message through the portal. I had one client that came to me, he said he had an incident. He verbally reported it to somebody, but he never actually made the effort to put it in the portal, so it would actually have a registered on A&Q, so, which is an inquiry number, so that at any point in time he could always go back and say, this is when I actually put the information in, can you please look this up, so that it could actually be applied. Because things fall through the crack. This is the reality of dealing with people at the end of the day. So we encourage persons to use the portal and to message and to communicate through the portal. And of course, when making your payments, the other thing is to make sure that you are applying your payments in the correct period. Because sometimes persons may put the wrong payment and then they say, well, I made my payment, but your payment was in the wrong period. So that will also affect your VAT filing at the end of the day. So we encourage you to be careful when you are putting in your payments and make sure that it is the right period that you're in. And these were just some key takeaways from our discussion today. So like I said, the PDF for this will be sent to persons. Just make sure you provided us your email as well as those online We'll make sure that the PDF for these things have also been sent and provided. Any questions? Thank you for your participation today.
Did you give, I wasn't here, I came late, but did you give us your email address?
I did not.
Can I have it?
Yes, we can. When you're ready.
November. Yeah.
So, it's Beaumont, B-E-A-U, as in boy, E-A-U, M-O-N-T.
You look like you don't want to give me this.
I give you time to write. You can spell my name wrong. T-O-D-D at bahamas.gov.bs.
Bahamas.gov.bs. It's nice to know that y'all have your own domain, because I usually talk to people who work in government and they use them for emails.
Okay. So, any other questions before we close out? Let me say thank you to those that joined us both in person and those online. Before we close it today, our next session will be on Friday. We'll most likely either be continuing some of the things we discussed or finalizing some things, because like I said, this is really our introductory week. But every week we'll have the schedule of the different modules that we're going through. As we started, we showed that there are about 7 or 8 modules for us to go through, and the intent is to go through every aspect at the end of the day. Okay, if no questions, thank you so much for your time. Please have a blessed day. Let me close out the same way we started. Father, I thank you for your grace and mercy. I thank you for those that were tuning in and those that are here. We pray, oh God, that you cover them and bless them as they leave, and let the information, oh God, go forward with your power in Jesus' name. Amen.